Anime fighters are known for three things. They're difficult, they're fast-paced, and their visual aesthetic is unmatched. Since the late 1990s, anime fighters have become one of the most popular subgenres in the wider fighting game community. Today, we're going to be talking about the title that set a new standard for the genre, and whose sequel is set to rock the FGC as a whole. This is Guilty Gear.
That is bullshit. Something just in my heart is like, if no one can tell me how to go, neither you are through your window. Open your eyes, you know the smell of the game.
The original Guilty Gear is a fast-paced, combo-focused fighter developed by Arcsys Works. The game's lead designer, Daisuke Ishiwatari, believed that fighting games should be difficult. Unlike other games that placed heavy emphasis on neutral game and footsies, Guilty Gear pushes the player to constantly engage and overwhelm their opponent. This was mostly thanks to the game's meter system, the Chaos Gauge, which allowed players to perform a special Chaos attack, but the gauge could only be charged by landing hits on your opponents. The game also featured secret instant kill moves, which were not listed in the game's manual. If executed correctly, these would not only end the round, but would instantly end the whole match, adding to the sense that a player could lose the game at any time. While the original was good, the series truly came into its own with the sequel, Guilty Gear X. While the original Guilty Gear had a unique style to it, the game suffered greatly due to hardware limitations. In an effort to have the game's soundtrack fit on the PS1 disc, the sound effects had to be extremely compressed, leading to some rather ridiculous sounding moments.
Dude, listen to the sound effect of the run. Sounds like a mouse pitter-pattering away.
So when Guilty Gear X released on the PS2, the series really got a chance to show off its unique style, with huge audio and visual improvements all around. Guilty Gear X didn't just come with technical improvements though. The biggest change would be to the Chaos Gauge. Since the Chaos Gauge was so successful in creating fast-paced action, the developers fully leaned into the concept and replaced the Chaos Gauge with the Tension Gauge. So what was different about the Tension Gauge? Simply put, it rewards players for doing anything that causes tension. Where the Chaos Gauge only rewarded you for landing hits, tension is awarded for something as simple as running at your opponent. Not only that, but any action that relieves tension gives you a negative penalty. So failing to make an attack or retreating to one side of the screen will drop your gauge to 0 and make it more difficult to build any new tension for the next 10 seconds. Chaos moves were renamed to overdrive attacks and now only cost half of the tension gauge instead of the whole Chaos Gauge, meaning that players were much more free to use them in tactical situations. The instant kill moves were also changed to be a bit more difficult. Now, if the player pressed all 4 attack buttons at once, they would turn their tension gauge into the instant kill gauge, which would rapidly deplete until the player turned it off or fired the instant kill move. If the player's instant kill gauge hit 0, it would begin to drain their HP, and if the player misses their instant kill move, they lose their tension gauge for the remainder of the round. Dead angle attacks, which allowed you to cancel your block to attack an opponent in the middle of their attack, now also relied on the tension gauge, and another entirely new mechanic called Roman cancels, which allowed players to cancel attacks and extend combos at the cost of half of their tension gauge. All of these new features added layers upon layers of nuance to the game, and the tension gauge would become the pivotal gameplay mechanic in the series, allowing players to shape their playstyle around how they chose to spend it. Due to the game's complex nature, it found extreme success with a niche audience, but was not able to break into the mainstream. In the world of 2D fighters, Street Fighter had been king for years, and with video game technology on the rise, games like Tekken and Soul Edge were dominating the market with their cutting-edge 3D graphics. For the next 14 years after Guilty Gear X, the game would see only one true sequel, with multiple re-releases, as well as 2 spin-off games. But without a proper 4th entry in the series, and its creators Arcsys Works creating new fighting games like Persona 4 Arena and Under Night in Birth, which heavily borrowed from Guilty Gear's visual style, it seemed that the series had hit a wall. But in 2014, a new entry would redefine the series' most iconic calling card: its aesthetic. With the release of Guilty Gear Xrd Sign, it was clear to everyone that Arcsys Works had created a visual masterpiece. Over the years, we have seen many 2D fighters attempt to make the change to 3D with mixed results. The main reason for wanting to change is that it allows games to be more dynamic, with sweeping camera angles and an improved sense of depth. It also makes it easier to create 3D models rather than hand drawing every single 2D sprite. Unfortunately, the transition from 2D sprites to 3D models means sacrificing an established aesthetic. But when Guilty Gear Xrd Sign looked at this problem, it said, hey, I'm not sacrificing anything. And Arc System Works' art team managed to create a 2D fighter using 3D models that looked like a 2D anime, so much so that you probably don't even realize it's 3D until the camera swings around. We're not going to go too in depth on the subject, but if you're interested in learning more about the topic, I highly suggest checking out New Frame Plus's fantastic video, which covers the animation of Arc System Works in great detail. Needless to say, this game is a treat to play and spectate. The cherry on top, however, is that the gameplay was also a step up. Enough so that Guilty Gear would finally find itself in the FGC Esports limelight. Guilty Gear Xrd Sign was embraced immediately by the wider FGC. Between 2015 and 2018, Sign and the updated sequel Guilty Gear Xrd Revelator were on the main stage at EVO, as well as 2019's EVO Japan. In its infancy, the best player in the world was Ogawa. He was probably best known for this moment.
No burst!
So smart!
Oh my
So
god!
smart!
Genius!
So smart, he couldn't burst because of the super. But Washiga thinks it's over!
Lock down,
But he
lock
won
down,
the last
lock down.
round!
What
And
is that?
Ogawa doesn't
What
care!
is that?
He still got 65%!
Oh my god!
Washiga, no!
Washiga, not like this! What are you
What
standing
are you
up for?
standing up for?
Why?
Where he absolutely destroys an opponent who put down his fight stick to celebrate too early. But Ogawa has been a dominant force for well over a decade, winning tournaments in GGXX Reload and Accent Core as far back as the early 2000s. He reigned over Guilty Gear for years, and the character Eddie was known as his character. He would go on to have one of the most infamous rivalries in the FGC with fellow competitor Machabo, who had become something of a villain of the scene after saying that becoming EVO champion in 2016 didn't make him happy. In response, Ogawa called him out, saying, quote, "I'd like to ask him, if it didn't bring you happiness, why are you still playing?" The two would continue to trash talk each other for a while, with Machabo insulting Ogawa's character and saying in a video, quote, "I dislike the guy. He may have been good a long time ago, but now he's nothing special. I'd give myself about a 95% chance." Despite most people rooting for Ogawa, they couldn't help but agree that Machabo seemed to be a clear favorite. The pot would finally boil over at Kembo no Michi, a tournament hosted by FGC veteran Daigo Umehara, and the two would play an insanely close first to 10 that had Ogawa coming on top 10-8, and Machabo earnestly admitting defeat. Since then, the two have taken a back seat in competitive Guilty Gear. The current champion of Guilty Gear Xrd Sign is Omito Hashimoto, a Johnny player known for his immaculate footsies. With 2 EVO championship titles under his belt, as well as a second place at EVO 2016 and EVO Japan 2018, there is no doubt that he is currently the best of the best. In fact, he's so good that after taking a loss early in bracket at EVO Japan 2018, his opponent, Shodai, started crying in disbelief that he won.
Oh my goodness gracious, dude.
And he is, you can tell, he's crying. My dude is crying right now.
If beating you elicits this kind of response from your opponent, you're probably doing something right. And then there's Nage. The definition of an analytical player, Nage mains one of the strangest characters in all of fighting games, Faust. Placing second at EVO 2015 and fourth at EVO 2017 and 18, Nage never had his big moment on the main stage. It took him years to recover from a crushing defeat at Super Battle Opera Tournament in 2010, which he said broke his spirit as a fighting game competitor. But since the release of Xrd Sign, Nage has started competing again. After several excellent runs at the biggest tournaments in the world, EVO Japan 2019 happened, and the grand finals went down as one of the greatest sets in Guilty Gear history. Nage, after years of competing, finally had a notch on his belt, taking down the indomitable Omito in the last round of the last game of the second set of grand finals. And that's pretty much where the competitive scene stands today. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, no major events have been held, as in-person competition is not allowed. However, lucky for Guilty Gear, this is not even close to the end. After Xrd, Arc System Works would create some of the biggest anime fighters ever, with Grand Blue and Dragon Ball FighterZ being their biggest projects to date. And finally, after 7 years, there's gonna be a new entry in the series. Guilty Gear Strive is set to be a game changer, bringing more than just a new coat of paint to the series. It's also bringing with it the one thing that FGC is most desperate for: good netcode. While many games claim to have good online, Arc System Works has put their money where their mouth is, and after the open beta, top FGC players from around the world have been singing the game's praises, and more eyes are on the game than ever before. With an insane amount of hype building around Strive, and its netcode putting it a tier above the rest, it looks like Guilty Gear will be ready to rock the top of the fighting game community once again.
This video was made possible thanks to our wonderful patrons. A huge thank you to everybody on this list, and shout out to Jason, Foxy, Lyra, Mauve, Nate, Nathan, Oshayo, Sierra, Shampoo, Weeaboo, and Spartacus for being platinum supporters. And an extra special shout out to Steven, Noodles, Marco, Mookie, Daniel, and Juke for being diamond supporters. Thanks a ton, guys, we really appreciate it.
If you also want to support our channel and unlock perks, check out the Patreon link in the description below, or join our Discord server. If you want to help us out in a different way, leaving a like, subscribing, and hitting the bell to stay up to date is also appreciated. My name is Jonah, thanks for watching.